Hey Garage Fabbers, you want to see something cool?
This is a Lexus LS430, and I work on these all the time at work, but I don't ever remember seeing door handles this close together on one.
No way.
This car is one of the most special cars to me, and it's not even mine. It's owned by Aristotle Rosario. Aris hit me up several years ago about installing suicide doors on his Lexus. Why is it so special? This car played a major part in discovering who I was as a person and the importance of mindset. Sounds pretty deep, huh? You have no idea. When I first met Aris, I had only recently decided to start my own fabrication business, Man Candy Creations. I'm about to make some confessions that just might make Aris's chin drop. I had a fair amount of fabrication experience, but nothing this extreme. I had never done suicide doors, and I had never worked on a luxury vehicle. Bro was asking me about doing major modifications that I had never done to a car I couldn't afford. I weighed the pros and cons. Cons. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have insurance, so if I screw it up, I could lose my house. And my dream of becoming a respected fabricator would be over. Pros. It would be dope. That settles it. Let's do this. My plan for the project was to buy some hinges, slap them on, move the door handles, and ship it on its way. Those plans went out the window pretty damn fast. The shape of the back edge of the door required a single hinge with a much larger swing than any of the aluminum hinges on the market. The hinge needed to push the door away from the body at least 6 inches to keep the window area from crashing into the side of the car when the door opened, and it had to support the weight of this abnormally heavy door. Aluminum wasn't going to cut it. The only option then was to design and build my own massive hinges, which ended up being made of half-inch thick steel formed into a 12-inch radius. There were more failures than successes, and the entire project was frustration after frustration. Quitting was literally not an option, so I was basically forced to figure it out. I filmed the whole damn process, but unfortunately, I lost all the footage. All that's left are these terrible resolution clips from my Instagram and a life lesson. Not everything is easy, but anything is possible with enough determination and focus. Worded more simply, keep moving forward. So this car is here today simply for this. The latch did not used to be in the front of the door. I had to relocate the latch from the rear to the front of the door. The upholsterer was not able to do anything nice. This right here, we had to cut into the door panel so that the striker could pass through. Today I have to figure out how to make some sort of fancy steel plate just to make it look better for car shows. I'm thinking I'm just going to put tape everywhere on this. Normally I would use cardstock to help map out a piece that I'm going to make, but since this has got so many compound curves, I'm just going to use painter's tape, tape up this whole section, and draw out the shape that I'm going to want to do. And then we have to figure out what we're going to do on the inside, because it's not just going to be a plate that covers the top of the door panel. It's actually going to be inside as well. I've only got a couple hours today, so the goal is to get all the patterns made and possibly get a prototype made up, and then Aris is going to come pick up his car and I will work on making the pieces that we make today pretty later on. The tape template is transferred onto steel and it's ready to cut out, but I wanted to make a cardstock version too. Cardstock is a lot easier to work with, so it'll allow me to mark how and where the metal version will later be shaped to fit the door panel. This is the first time I use the air nibbler on a real project. Normally, I prefer my generic Beverly style shear, but if you don't have one, this nibbler was pretty cheap and way better than tin snips. Not very precise, at least not with my level of experience, but accurate enough to make quick work of fine-tuning with a flap disc. Eris came to pick up the car already, and I wasn't as far along as I had hoped, but I kept the door panels, so hopefully that's all I need to finish these up. Here's where the cardstock template comes in. It allowed me to position this theoretical part on the door panel, mark where the bends would be, and then transfer that to the metal version. The edge of the door panel isn't straight, so both legs needed to be bent and shaped separately. Starting with a rough bend in the right location, and then adjusting it to fit the door panel using a piece of pipe that matches the radius of the door panel edge. The second element of this part is less about form and more about function. This door is stupid heavy, and unfortunately, even with the heavy-duty hinge I built, it's not as stable and carefree as the factory 2-hinge setup. If you're not careful when closing this door, it could bounce a little and the latch could miss the striker. That said, I want the mouth of this part to be wider, and it will narrow like a funnel to guide the striker into the latch. I presented this challenge to my brother, who gave me the idea to use the tapered portion of a ladyfoot or a rolling wedge bar to create this shape. This left me with a piece of sheet metal with a 1/4-inch opening on one side and a 1/2-inch opening on the back side. After trimming this part to fit the other, I welded them together with some very large beads. That's because I want to sculpt the front of these parts to have nice rounded corners on the leading edge, making the striker funnel more like a striker trumpet. The goal is to make these doors close flawlessly every time, even when closed by a chimpanzee that had too much coffee. The face of this door panel has a few compound curves, so I had to massage the edges a bit to fit perfectly. These trim plates are going to be glued in place, but I'm going to install a screw to hold them in place while the glue sets. I think some coarse drywall screws would bite nicely into the foam and fiberglass door panel, but the heads will look like drywall screws, and that's a no-no. Luckily, I found some drywall screws with a Torx head, which is a fastener that Lexus commonly uses. I want these screws to be countersunk into these trim pieces, but I don't have a tool to do that. So I just beat the snot out of the screw until it was flush. Then finished it off by tightening down one of those Torx head screws into a block of wood. These things are more or less ready to install, but we'll be powder coating them satin black first. It sounds weird after all this work, but they're supposed to be unseen. Meaning, if you see them, great. They'll make the door panel look more finished, but they're not there to attract attention. Prior to shipping off to powder coat, I'm going to smooth out the metal a little. Some scratches are necessary to give the powder coat something to bond to, but powder coat can't hide deep scratches and dings. Last thing, I made a video recently about improving the looks of your fabrication. In that video, I talked about beveling and chamfering the edges of your parts. Some folks mentioned in the comments that it not only looks better, but also reduces the chances of slicing yourself open and helps paint bond better to the corners. This is the epitome of attention to detail. These edges will more than likely never be noticed. This is 16 gauge sheet metal, so the chamfers themselves are probably about 1/32 of an inch. Not really noticeable unless you touch your eyeball to it. Yet somehow, it changes the whole thing. Patience and pride, my friends. If you can cultivate those two things, you'll go far. And that's it for my part. These will be powder coated black before they are permanently installed, but ain't nobody got time for that. I'll try to meet up with Eris at a car show sometime and grab a few shots of the final product, but I gotta keep moving forward. I've started the lower control arms on Caroline's Mighty Max. I'll be learning to aluminum TIG weld. I've got a bed to build for a buddy, an air management system to mount, a Blueberry to modify. There's a lot going on. So I'll see you soon, my friends. And until then, keep moving forward.